welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We do appreciate you joining us here live. If you can't listen to the entire program right this second, remember you can download it and have it on hand later on platforms like Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. And as always, we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program, and together we can push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. Today we have a great show lined up for you. We have Dane Lloyd, the Member of Parliament for Sturgeon, River-Parkland in the beautiful province of Alberta. He's also the Shadow Minister for Emergency Preparedness. We are going to talk about the Emergencies Act and some of the claims the government made that just don't seem to be coming true. So, Dane, welcome. If you haven't checked out Dane's social media profile, I encourage you to do that because he has been grilling witnesses at committee and just shooting down one after another of the Liberal government's claims on why they invoked the Emergencies Act.
Thanks for having me on, Jamie. No, it's been a really great couple of months for debunking a lot of claims that the government's made. And would you like me to talk about a few
Absolutely,
of those today?
Please. Yes, absolutely.
Well, you know, just an hour ago, we actually had our former leader, Andrew Scheer, at the Procedure Committee, and they're doing a study on changing downtown Ottawa so that it can be more under the jurisdiction of the Parliamentary Protective Services. And we had our friend, Ottawa Interim Chief of Police Steve Bell, at committee, and Andrew Scheer asked Chief Bell, did you ask the Liberal government to invoke the Emergencies Act? And Steve Bell said, no, we did not ask. And for those of you who've been following online, I've been asking Minister Mendicino, the Public Safety Minister, to back up numerous claims he's made in Parliament that it was law enforcement that asked the government to invoke the Emergencies Act. And we saw RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki at committee last week saying they didn't ask the government to invoke the Emergencies Act. And today we had Ottawa Interim Chief of Police Bell also saying they didn't ask. So it's very quickly becoming apparent that there was no law enforcement asking for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. And so, you know, we're going to have to see what the minister's going to say about that.
Okay, there's also, they made the claim that there were firearms at the Ottawa protest, which you in committee questioned the interim police chief who said otherwise.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, in the absence of, you know, hard evidence, there was a lot of innuendo. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the Ottawa police had made a claim early on during the protest that they had intelligence saying that there was firearms and foreign money flowing into the protests. And sort of people just took that up and ran with it. Mm-hmm. And then what really set me off was that there was a Toronto Star article that said that a police source had told the journalist that loaded shotguns were found in the trucks at the protest. And so that was the first time that anyone actually claimed that there had been firearms found by police. And so when I asked Interim Chief of Police Bell, I expected him to say yes, that there had been firearms found at the protest. But when he said otherwise, mm-hmm. I think that's a great opportunity for us to demonstrate that a lot of these claims that are being made, you have to really look deeply into them because you later find out that they're not true.
Well, we also heard the Prime Minister and others in Parliament talk about kind of dark money that is funding this the protest that was in Ottawa. Turns out that's not true either.
Well, and this was really interesting. This was sort of earlier on testimony. We actually had FinTrack, which mm-hmm. is Canada's agency for tracking, you know, terrorist financing and organized crime financing. And when we had them come at committee, they said, look, this funding is predominantly coming from Canadian sources. They are small donations from people who are frustrated about the COVID-19 mandates. There was significant funding coming from small donors in the United States as well. Not the majority, as the government was claiming. Certainly not Russian money, as the CBC had previously sort mm-hmm. of implied was happening. Not state foreign-backed money, not organized crime money, not terrorist money. It was just money from regular people who were, you know, protesting the government's actions. And so, you know, when the government was talking about dark money, we had GoFundMe, we had Give, Send, Go come to committee, and they really shot down that claim from this government.
So we also heard the government say that there was people being harassed about potential arson in that apartment building. Turns out that that group was not connected to the protesters at all.
Yeah, that was really disappointing, you know, because, you know, we had this case where there was a terrible arson attempt, and then you see all these politicians jumping on it, trying to lay the blame on the convoy before there was any evidence to suggest that the convoy members had been involved. And I was always very suspicious about it because the guys in the videos that we saw were wearing masks, and you would think that a convoy of protesters who are protesting mandates and masks, why would they be wearing a mask to go into an apartment building to set it on fire? And so we had these politicians, predominantly the NDP and the Liberal politicians, who are claiming that this was the convoy protesters. They have ill intent. They want to do harm and kill people in the city. And when the facts come out, the Ottawa police apprehended these individuals, and they had nothing to do with the protest.
That's right. And I think the person caught on video dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier was questioned by Ottawa police, and it turns out that person had nothing to do with the convoy either. So I think one after another, the reasons why the government was talking about invoking the Emergencies Act are coming down around them. So at the end of the day, what does the government have left, or what are they using as the justification for invoking that?
Well, what really bothers me is the government is now basically saying the ends justify the means. So it doesn't matter how they dealt, they're claiming it doesn't matter how they dealt with the protests, they just got rid of them, and that's what the people wanted. Well, we've seen in history how governments that say, well, it was necessary, we had to do it, and that justifies doing it. And it's like, no, we live in a nation that is governed by the rule of law. And the Emergencies Act is a very specific piece of law that gives the government extraordinary powers to limit the rights of Canadians in extraordinary situations. But with extraordinary power comes extraordinary responsibility and a need for extraordinary accountability. And what we've seen from this Liberal government is they don't want to be accountable. They don't want to answer questions about the evidence that they use to justify the act. And I think we're setting a very dangerous precedent as a country if we don't hold this government accountable and they're not transparent about the reasons for invoking the act.
Well, the whole reason around the legislation, too, provides for that kind of sober second thought, if you will, to understand not the reasons for the people protesting or whatever causes the Emergencies Act to be started, but the thought process within the government to what led to that decision. That's what is supposed to be analyzed and to see whether or not they made the right decision. Maybe they didn't, but because there is that period when it starts to when the vote happens, and of course it could be an invasion or something could happen where the government needs that power, but we need to understand why and what led to it.
Well, this is, we've been saying over the past 2 years, unprecedented has been said too much, but really this is unprecedented. This is the first time this law has ever been used. And so we as parliamentarians are making history in this country because the way that we're acting and the things that we accept, the standards that we set today are the standards that are going to be used by future generations when they're faced with the same challenges. So as Conservatives, I think we have a very important role to play in standing up for civil liberties and standing up for accountability. At the Parliamentary Review Committee, through the inquiry that's being carried out, we need to stand firm because if this law is going to be used in the future, there might be some more left-wing groups that maybe they are the ones that are having their rights abused in the future. And so we need to stand up for the rights of all Canadians and make sure that governments of all stripes are utilizing the Emergencies Act in the appropriate way.
Absolutely. And I think as we go through this process, I think it's going to become clear to Canadians that existing laws were available that could have been used to move the protesters out of the downtown core.
I think there was existing laws that could have maybe prevented it from getting to where it was. There was existing laws that could have dealt with numerous issues like the tow trucks, which the government has claimed. The criminal code gives them the power to compel the tow trucks. Now, if the protest turned into a riot, we have something in this country called the Riot Act, and that would have given police the authority to break up the protest. But the protest never met the legal threshold of a riot. And so that's why the government had to invoke the Emergencies Act, because in Canada, we have a right to protest. It's in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And so the government couldn't get rid of a lawful protest until they turned it into an unlawful protest. And they had to use the Emergencies Act to do that. And so in some sense, they did need to use the Emergencies Act, but they needed to use the Emergencies Act in order to violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in order to suspend the charter rights of Canadians. And in that aspect, it was necessary for them to use it, but was it right for them to use it? Absolutely. I don't think it was not right. It was absolutely not right to use it.
Right. I think they also had the still existing law to move cars that were blocking kind of critical infrastructure or the right of others to have their way.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I observed during the protest is that there was always a lane down Wellington Street that was open for emergency services. And I do know that looking at the evidence that there was some coordination between the protesters and Ottawa police early on during the protest to ensure that there were available lanes for emergency vehicles. So that's something that, I think the evidence is going to show, is that there was a certain level of, cooperation with the protesters to ensure that, public safety would be protected to a certain extent.
Okay, I know we're running out of time here. I did want to ask you about this. We're talking about the NDP motion today in the House of Commons, and just to give our viewers and listeners some idea, it's talking about the high gas prices, right? We're seeing over $2 a liter for regular, $2.30, probably more for diesel for a liter. The NDP are saying that oil and gas companies are making record profits, which they are, but at the same time, they're saying that the Canadian government needs to stop using taxpayers' dollars to subsidize the oil and gas industry. But I think at the bottom line is they don't actually get subsidies. It's just tax benefits that are available to every single business in kind of the resource sector, writing off your losses, the exploration, tax credits, that kind of thing. But what would this do to the price of gasoline if this motion were to take effect and the government to basically take away any tax measures that are available to any business, but only target the oil and gas industry?
Well, it would be devastating. We have to remember the reason why there's so much tightness in the oil sector today is because we had 7 years of low oil prices. Because of the shale revolution in the United States, OPEC, Russia was providing oil. And so there was a lot of underinvestment in developing new oil resources. We didn't have the pipelines we needed in Canada to grow our sector because of government regulation and opposition. And so for the NDP to come in and say the solution right now is to basically tax the oil companies more by removing their ability to deduct their losses from the last 7 years, what that is going to do is that's going to lower oil and gas investment in our country. And when you lower that oil and gas investment, that means that you're going to have a lot higher oil and gas prices going into the future. So perversely, I think what the NDP are trying to do is actually going to make energy more unaffordable in this country. And I find it ironic because this is exactly what they've been wanting to do for the last, over 7 years. They've wanted to make energy unaffordable so that people would move over to more renewable energy sources. But I think what we're finding is that these renewable energy sources are not currently capable of meeting the needs of a modern industrialized nation. And I don't think they're going to be capable of replacing oil for a number of decades. And so while we're doing this right now, we should be trying to work with the oil companies to make every barrel the cleanest barrel possible, not being punitive with these companies by going after them and trying to tax them more, which is only going to lead to higher prices at the pumps.
Absolutely. We'll quickly, just one more thing. What conservatives are always talking about, the energy portfolio. It's not an either-or situation. We want to have an abundance of energy, so we look at all available sources, and the market helps to decide this and a whole bunch of other things. But, conservatives aren't against renewable energy, but we're not against shutting down the oil and gas sector and only putting all our eggs in one basket, because that basket isn't prepared to deal with the supply that's needed in terms of electric vehicles, batteries, you name it, that will need to make this work.
Well, and you got to look at what companies are the ones that are investing the most in renewable energy. You're looking at companies like Suncor, like Enbridge, like British Petroleum. These are the companies that are investing in things like biofuels, windmills, solar panels, cogeneration of their facilities. These are the technologies, carbon capture and sequestration. These are the technologies that are going to enable us to decarbonize our economy at a rapid rate. And so going after these companies punitively is only going to set back the cause of renewable energy, which, of course, the Conservatives support developing more renewable energy.
For sure. So, Dane, we always give the guests the final word, so you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. We can talk about the Emergencies Act, the oil and gas sector, whatever you want. The floor is yours, the conflict, you name it.
Well, the one issue that, I bring up a whole other can of worms here is that I received an ATIP a number of weeks ago that indicates that the government's much vaunted Guns and Gangs initiative that they launched back in 2017, they said over 5 years, we're going to put $325 million to combat guns and gangs. And we've found that after 5 years, they spent less than half of that. They spent less than $140 million of that promised $325 million. And now they're launching this $1 billion plus gun registry and gun buyback plan to go after law-abiding gun owners. Meanwhile, we're seeing violence explode across cities in this country. We just saw a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, in a carjacking
yes,
with a firearm. This is This is terrible. And so we need the government to be looking at common sense solutions. And the fact that they were underspending their budget on, providing law enforcement the tools to go after guns, illegal guns, and gang violence. I mean, I think that's partially the reason that we're seeing the rise in violence. And this whole $1 billion going towards law-abiding gun owners, I know that can be used a heck of a lot better going to community groups to get youth out of crime, going into stopping the illegal flow of firearms over the border, and giving the police, the power to go after organized crime and break up these violent crimes before they happen. So that's what we need to see more of in this country.
I think it for the government, it just seems easier to go after a group of law-abiding firearms owners and kind of give the false sense of security that they're actually doing something.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's such a fake narrative. And I think it drives the Liberals' wedge politics by going after law-abiding firearms owners. It makes them look like they're doing something.
Yes.
And in reality, though, I think what we really want to see is an increase in public safety in this country.
Yep.
And I think the Conservatives have a much better approach to this by going after criminals and illegal guns. And I think that's going to be the approach. I think we saw it under the previous Conservative government, that we had crime rates trending solidly down in this country. And it's only been since the Liberals came into power that we've seen a large uptrend in violent crime in this country. And so clearly their approach is not working, and our approach did have an impact.
Well, we can even go into Bill C-75, a bill that lessened a lot of the sentences for pretty serious crimes. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I do appreciate the ability to have you here and talk about these issues. So that's Dane Lloyd, the Member of Parliament for Sturgeon, River-Parkland. He is also the critic for Emergency Preparedness. Always a wealth of knowledge. We do appreciate his time. We appreciate your time as well. We have new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's information that is probably not being talked about in the mainstream media. So with that, we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program, and together we can ensure that this is Justin Trudeau's last term in office. And of course, please tell your friends, because you can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. As always, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.